The rifle's crack echoed across the canyon as Charlotte Whitmore pressed herself against the rocky outcrop, her heart hammering against her ribs. The mail coach lay overturned 50 yards below, its wheels still spinning lazily in the desert air. Her carefully packed trunk had burst open, spilling her finest dresses and delicate undergarments across the blood-soaked sand like fallen petals. "Stay down," commanded a deep voice behind her, rough as whiskey and twice as intoxicating. She turned to see a man unlike any from her sheltered Boston upbringing, tall and lean, with copper skin that spoke of mixed heritage and eyes the color of storm clouds. His black hair fell past his shoulders, adorned with a single eagle feather, and intricate tattoos spiraled down his muscled arms. He moved with the fluid grace of a predator, checking his rifle with practiced efficiency. Before we continue with Charlotte's incredible journey, if you're enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to help me reach my first 50 subscribers. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more epic Western romance tales. Now let's get back to the story. "Who are you?" Charlotte whispered, though she already knew he wasn't one of the bandits who had attacked their coach. Those men had fled when this stranger appeared like some avenging spirit from the rocks above. "Someone who's going to keep you alive." His gaze swept over her torn traveling dress, lingering on the pale skin of her throat where her collar had been ripped away. "The name's Gabriel Runningwolf." Charlotte's breath caught. She'd heard whispers of him in the settlements, half Lakota, half Irish, a man who walked between two worlds and belonged fully to neither. Some called him savage, others called him saint. Looking into his fierce eyes now, she thought perhaps he was both. "I'm Charlotte Whitmore," she managed, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "I was traveling to Devil's Creek to marry Mr. Jeremiah Thompson." Something dark flickered across Gabriel's features. "Thompson's dead, killed by those same bandits 3 days ago." The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd traveled 2,000 miles to marry a man she'd never met, carrying nothing but hope and determination to escape her suffocating life in Boston society. Now that hope lay shattered like her scattered belongings below. Gabriel studied her face, noting the way her green eyes flashed with defiance rather than despair. Most Eastern ladies would be weeping by now. This one lifted her chin and squared her shoulders like she was preparing for battle. "What happens to me now?" she asked. "That depends." He stepped closer, and she caught his scent, leather, sage, and something indefinably masculine that made her pulse quicken. "The nearest settlement is 5 days hard riding through Apache territory. You can try to make it on foot or you come with me to my place. It's hidden in the mountains, safe." Charlotte knew she should be afraid. Every lesson from her proper upbringing screamed warnings about trusting a half-breed stranger in the wilderness, but when Gabriel's eyes met hers, she felt something she'd never experienced in all her 23 years. A pull so strong it seemed to come from her very soul. "Why would you help me?" Gabriel's laugh was low and rough. "Maybe I have a weakness for stubborn Eastern ladies who don't cry when their world falls apart." Heat rose in Charlotte's cheeks, but not from embarrassment. The way he looked at her made her feel alive in a way she'd never imagined. In Boston, men had courted her for her father's money or her family's connections. This man saw something else entirely. "I'll come with you," she said, surprising herself with the quickness of her decision. Gabriel nodded and began gathering supplies from the wreckage. Charlotte tried to salvage what she could of her belongings, but most were ruined or scattered. As she bent to retrieve a leather-bound book of poetry, Gabriel's hand touched hers, sending electricity shooting up her arm. "Leave it," he said softly. "Where we're going, you won't need reminders of the old world." Their eyes locked, and Charlotte felt something shift inside her chest, as if doors she'd never known existed were swinging open. She let the book fall, The journey into the mountains tested every limit Charlotte thought she possessed. Gabriel's horse, a magnificent black stallion named Thunder, carried them both through terrain that seemed impossible to navigate. Charlotte sat pressed against Gabriel's broad back, her arms wrapped around his waist, acutely aware of every muscle that flexed beneath his buckskin shirt. They rode in relative silence, stopping only when necessary. Gabriel proved to be a man of few words, but Charlotte found herself studying the strong line of his jaw, the way his hair caught the sunlight, the careful way he checked their surroundings for danger. On the second day, they made camp beside a hidden stream. Charlotte had never slept under open stars, and despite the circumstances, she found herself enchanted by the vast canopy overhead. "It's beautiful," she murmured, sitting by their small fire. Gabriel looked up from cleaning his rifle. "You're not what I expected when I saw that fancy dress." "What did you expect? A spoiled Eastern princess who'd faint at the first sign of hardship." Charlotte smiled. "I may surprise you yet, Mr. Running Wolf." The way she said his name, with that slight Boston accent wrapping around the syllables, sent heat coursing through Gabriel's veins. He'd rescued her on impulse, telling himself it was simple human decency. But as firelight danced across her face, highlighting the intelligence in her green eyes and the determined set of her mouth, he admitted the truth. He'd been drawn to her from the moment he saw her. Loving the tension between these characters. Hit that like button and subscribe. I'm on a mission to reach 50 subscribers, and you can help me get there. Every subscription counts. Now let's see what happens next. That night, Charlotte lay wrapped in Gabriel's spare blanket, listening to the whisper of wind through pine trees. She could hear Gabriel's steady breathing nearby, and found herself wondering what it would feel like to curl against his warmth instead of lying alone. The thought shocked her. She'd been raised to be a proper lady, to never think such improper thoughts about a man, especially not a man society would consider beneath her station. But something about the wilderness seemed to be awakening parts of herself she'd never known existed. On the third day, they encountered a war party of Apache warriors. Gabriel reined in Thunder as 5 painted riders emerged from the rocks ahead, their horses dancing with restrained energy. Charlotte felt Gabriel's body tense, but he showed no fear as their leader rode forward. The conversation that followed was conducted in a mixture of Apache and sign language. Charlotte watched in fascination as Gabriel spoke with fluid gestures, his face serious but respectful. After several tense minutes, the Apache leader nodded and spoke a single word. "What did he say?" Charlotte whispered, as the warriors disappeared back into the rocks. "He said you have brave eyes for a white woman," Gabriel replied, a note of admiration in his voice. "He's letting us pass." Charlotte felt a surge of pride. She'd sat still and silent while armed warriors surrounded them, and somehow that had earned their respect. "How do you know their language?" "I lived with various tribes for several years after my mother died. The Apache taught me much about surviving in this land." Charlotte wanted to ask more about his past, but something in his expression warned her off. Instead, she said, "You speak beautifully, like poetry." Gabriel turned to look at her, surprised. Most whites saw Indian languages as primitive grunting. This woman continued to surprise him at every turn. They reached Gabriel's hidden valley on the 4th day, and Charlotte gasped at the sight that greeted them. Nestled between towering red cliffs was a paradise. Green meadows, fed by a crystal stream, stands of aspen and pine, and in the center, a cabin that seemed to grow organically from the landscape itself. "It's magnificent," Charlotte breathed. Gabriel felt a swell of pride. He'd built this place with his own hands, creating something that honored both sides of his heritage. The cabin's design blended Irish stonework with Lakota building techniques, while the surrounding gardens held both European vegetables and native plants. "This is home," he said simply. As they approached the cabin, Charlotte noticed details that spoke of Gabriel's dual nature. dream catchers hanging beside horseshoes, medicine bundles next to carved Celtic knots. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen, and she found herself falling in love with its wild beauty. That evening, Gabriel prepared a meal unlike any Charlotte had ever tasted: venison seasoned with wild herbs, corn cakes, and tea brewed from mountain plants. They sat before his stone fireplace as rain drummed against the windows. "Tell me about Boston," Gabriel said, settling beside her with his own cup of tea. Charlotte found herself describing her old life: the suffocating social expectations, the endless round of meaningless parties, the way she'd felt like a bird in a gilded cage. As she spoke, Gabriel studied her face in the firelight, noting the passion that crept into her voice when she talked about the books she'd read, the dreams she'd harbored of adventure and freedom. "Why did you agree to marry Thompson?" he asked. Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. "Because I thought it was my only escape. My father wanted to marry me off to his business partner, a man 3 times my age who collected wives like trophies. Mr. Thompson's advertisement in the newspaper seemed like salvation. And now?" Charlotte looked around the cozy cabin, then into Gabriel's storm-grey eyes. "Now I think perhaps I was meant for a different kind of salvation entirely." The air between them crackled with tension. Gabriel set down his cup and moved closer, his hand coming up to trace the line of her jaw. Charlotte's breath caught at his gentle touch. "Charlotte," he said, her name sounding like a prayer on his lips. "You should know. If you stay here with me, there's no going back to your old world. Society would never accept—" "I don't care about society," Charlotte interrupted, her hand covering his. "I've spent my whole life caring what others think, and it brought me nothing but misery." Gabriel's eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of doubt or fear. Instead, he found a determination that matched his own. "If you're loving this tale so far, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. I'm working hard to reach 50 subscribers, and every single one of you makes a difference. Help me grow this channel." Now back to Charlotte. Slowly giving her every chance to pull away, Gabriel leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers. The kiss was soft, tentative, a question rather than a demand. Charlotte answered by pressing closer, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with all the pent-up passion she'd never been allowed to express. Gabriel groaned low in his throat, his arms coming around her to pull her against him. Charlotte had been kissed before by proper Boston gentlemen, chaste, bloodless pecks that left her feeling nothing. This was different. This was fire and lightning and the promise of everything she'd been missing. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Charlotte," Gabriel whispered against her forehead, "are you certain? Once we cross this line—" "I've never been more certain of anything in my life," she replied, surprising herself with her boldness. Gabriel's response was to capture her lips again, this time with less restraint. His hands tangled in her auburn hair as he deepened the kiss, and Charlotte felt herself melting against him like snow in spring sunshine. That night, Gabriel showed Charlotte pleasures she'd never dreamed existed. He worshipped her body with hands that knew how to be both gentle and demanding, teaching her the ancient dance between man and woman that no amount of proper upbringing could have prepared her for. In the flickering candlelight, Charlotte traced the tattoos that decorated Gabriel's chest, symbols of protection, strength, and connection to the natural world. Each mark told a story, and she found herself hungry to learn them all. "What does this one mean?" she whispered, her finger following the curve of a stylized eagle across his shoulder. "Freedom," Gabriel replied, his voice rough with desire. "The ability to soar above the expectations others would place on you." Charlotte smiled and pressed a kiss to the tattoo. "Then we're both eagles now." Gabriel's eyes darkened with emotion. No one had ever understood him the way this remarkable woman seemed to. She didn't see his mixed heritage as something to overcome or hide. She embraced it as part of what made him who he was. The days that followed passed like a beautiful dream. Gabriel taught Charlotte to ride thunder, to track animals through the forest, to identify edible plants and natural medicines. In return, she shared stories from her extensive reading, teaching him about distant lands and different cultures. They made love under the stars beside the stream, in meadows carpeted with wildflowers against the smooth rocks of hidden caves. Each encounter was a revelation, stripping away more of Charlotte's civilized restraints and awakening desires she'd never known she possessed. But their paradise couldn't last forever. The trouble arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of 5 armed men wearing territorial marshal badges. Charlotte was gathering herbs in the garden when she heard horses approaching. Gabriel emerged from the cabin, his rifle in hand but not yet raised. "Gabriel Running Wolf," called the lead rider, a hard-faced man with steel-grey hair. "I'm Marshal Pike. We've come for the woman." Charlotte's blood ran cold. These weren't here by coincidence. "What woman?" Gabriel asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Charlotte Whitmore, daughter of Boston shipping magnate Edmund Whitmore. She was kidnapped from the mail coach attack last week." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "The lady wasn't kidnapped. She's here of her own free will." Marshal Pike's laugh was harsh. "A proper Boston lady choosing to live in sin with a half-breed? I don't think so." Charlotte stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "I am indeed here by choice, Marshal. No one kidnapped me." Pike's eyes raked over her appearance. The simple dress she'd borrowed from Gabriel's limited supplies, her sun-bronzed skin, the flowers woven through her hair. "Miss Whitmore, your father sent word that you were disturbed by your ordeal. He's prepared to overlook this unfortunate incident if you come home quietly." "I'm not going home," Charlotte stated firmly. "I'm staying here with Gabriel." The marshal's face hardened. "I'm afraid that's not an option. Your father has filed charges against this man for kidnapping and corrupting an innocent woman. If you don't come willingly, we'll take him into custody." Charlotte felt Gabriel tense beside her. She knew he could probably escape into the wilderness where these men could never find him, but not without abandoning her to be dragged back to Boston. "How much?" Gabriel asked quietly. "What? How much is Whitmore paying you to bring her back?" Pike's smile was ugly. "More than you could ever afford, half-breed." Gabriel nodded slowly, as if he'd expected this answer. Then, moving faster than a striking snake, he brought his rifle up and fired a shot that knocked Pike's hat clean off his head. "Ride out," Gabriel said, his voice deadly calm as he worked the rifle's action. "Now, before I decide to aim lower." Yeet. The other 4 marshals reached for their weapons, but found themselves facing not only Gabriel's rifle, but also Charlotte, who had somehow produced a pistol from beneath her skirts. "The lady said she's staying," Gabriel continued. "I suggest you respect her wishes. We're getting to the most intense part of the story. If you're hooked, show your support by hitting like and subscribe. Help me reach 50 subscribers so I can keep bringing you these passionate Western romances. Let's continue." Pike's face flushed red with anger, but he was no fool. Gabriel Running Wolf's reputation with a rifle was legendary, and the woman beside him looked perfectly capable of using that pistol. "This isn't over," Pike snarled as he retrieved his hat. "Whitmore has influence. He'll send the army if he has to." "Let him," Charlotte said, her voice ringing with conviction. "I'm not his property, and I'm not going back to be sold to the highest bidder." As the marshals rode away, Gabriel turned to stare at Charlotte in amazement. "Where did you learn to handle a gun?" Charlotte smiled, some of her old mischief returning. "You're not the only one with surprises, Mr. Running Wolf. My father insisted I learn to protect myself during our summers in the country. He just never imagined I'd use those skills against his own men." Gabriel laughed and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around as she shrieked with laughter. But even as they celebrated their small victory, both knew this was only the beginning. That night, as they lay entwined before the fire, Charlotte traced patterns on Gabriel's chest. "They'll be back," she said quietly. "Yes, with more men, maybe soldiers. Probably." Charlotte was quiet for a long moment. "Gabriel, what if we disappeared? Really disappeared, I mean. Went somewhere they could never find us." Gabriel's arms tightened around her. "I've been thinking the same thing. I know places. Deep in the mountains, hidden valleys, where no white man has ever set foot. We could make a new life there." "What about supplies? Tools? The things we'd need to survive?" Gabriel smiled into her hair. "I've been preparing for something like this my whole life. I have caches hidden throughout these mountains, everything we'd need to start over." Charlotte lifted her head to look into his eyes. "You'd give up this place. Your home. Charlotte, don't you understand?" Gabriel's hand cupped her face tenderly. "You are my home now. This cabin, this valley, they're just places. But you're my heart, my soul, my reason for breathing." Tears pricked Charlotte's eyes at the raw emotion in his voice. "I love you too," she whispered, "more than I ever thought possible." They made love again that night, with desperate passion, as if trying to burn the memory of each touch into their souls. When morning came, they began preparations for their escape into the true wilderness. Gabriel retrieved his hidden supplies, while Charlotte packed only the essentials. She felt no sadness at leaving behind the remnants of her old life, the fancy dresses, the jewelry, the books that had once been her escape from reality. Now she had a better escape, freedom itself. 3 days later, they stood on a ridge overlooking the hidden valley that would become their new home. It was even more remote than Gabriel's first refuge, accessible only through a narrow canyon that could easily be defended. A clear lake reflected the surrounding peaks, and meadows thick with wild grass promised good grazing for Thunder and the mare Gabriel had acquired for Charlotte. "It's perfect," Charlotte breathed, and meant it. They spent the summer building their new home together. Gabriel taught Charlotte skills no Boston lady had ever learned: how to build with stone and timber, how to preserve meat, how to read weather signs in the clouds. Charlotte contributed her own knowledge, helping to design a cabin that was both practical and beautiful. As autumn painted the mountains in shades of gold and scarlet, Charlotte discovered she was with child. She told Gabriel one evening as they sat beside their new fireplace, watching sparks dance up the chimney. "I'm carrying your baby," she said simply. Gabriel's face went through a dozen emotions before settling on pure joy. He pulled her onto his lap, his hands already moving to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. "Are you happy?" Charlotte asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy?" Gabriel's laugh was rich and warm. "Charlotte, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted. A partner, a home, a family. Yes, I'm happy." That winter tested them in ways they'd never imagined. The snows came early and heavy, sealing their valley off from the outside world. But instead of feeling trapped, Charlotte felt liberated. For the first time in her life, she was exactly where she wanted to be, with the person she was meant to love. Gabriel proved to be an attentive, expectant father, creating furniture for the nursery and carefully monitoring Charlotte's health. Charlotte, despite the discomforts of pregnancy, felt more alive than ever. Her body was changing, growing rounder with new life, and she marveled at the miracle occurring within her. Spring brought the birth of their daughter, whom they named Hope. Charlotte held the tiny, perfect child and felt her heart expand beyond anything she'd thought possible. Hope had Gabriel's dark hair and Charlotte's green eyes, and she would grow up knowing both her father's Lakota traditions and her mother's Irish heritage. "She's beautiful," Gabriel whispered, his finger tracing Hope's tiny hand. "She's ours," Charlotte replied, and in those two words conveyed all the wonder and gratitude she felt. As Hope grew from infant to toddler, the family created their own traditions, mixing Charlotte's Christmas celebrations with Gabriel's seasonal ceremonies, teaching Hope to speak both English and Lakota, showing her how to move respectfully through the natural world while also appreciating the beauty of literature and music. 2 years after Hope's birth, Charlotte gave birth to a son they named Skywalker, honoring Gabriel's heritage while looking forward to the boy's future. Their family was complete, their love deeper than the mountain lakes and stronger than the winter winds. One day, when Hope was 4 and Skywalker 2, a lone rider appeared at the mouth of their canyon. Charlotte's heart clenched with fear. Had they finally been found? But the rider proved to be an old Apache friend of Gabriel's, bringing news from the outside world. "Your woman's father is dead," the Apache said in his accented English. "The men looking for you have stopped coming." Charlotte felt a complex mix of emotions at the news of Edmund Whitmore's death. Sadness for the relationship they'd never had, but also relief that the threat to her family was gone. "What about the Marshalls?" Gabriel asked. The Apache smiled. "Marshal Pike tried to pursue a cattle rustler into Apache territory last year. He didn't come back out." That evening, as Charlotte and Gabriel sat watching their children play by the lake, Charlotte reflected on the journey that had brought them here. "Do you ever regret it?" Gabriel asked, as if reading her thoughts. "Giving up your old life?" Charlotte turned to study his beloved face, weathered now by years of mountain sun and wind, but still the most beautiful sight in her world. Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please smash that like button and subscribe to help me reach my goal of 50 subscribers. Your support helps me create more amazing Western romance stories for you. What did you think of this story? Let me know in the comments below. "Gabriel Running Wolf," Charlotte said, her voice rich with love and laughter. "I was never truly alive until the day you carried me into this wilderness. Everything I thought I wanted, society's approval, material comfort, respectability, it was all just shadows. This is real. You are real. Our children, our love, our life together. This is the only reality that matters." Gabriel pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair mixed with mountain wildflowers. "And I discovered that love isn't something you plan for or arrange through newspaper advertisements. It's something that happens when two souls recognize they belong together, no matter what the world thinks of their choice." As the sun set behind the peaks, painting their hidden valley in shades of rose and gold, Charlotte smiled with complete contentment. She had traveled thousands of miles to find a husband she'd never met, only to discover a love she'd never expected with a man who saw her true heart. In the wilderness, she had found not just survival, but the deepest desires of her soul: passion, purpose, and a love that would last beyond the mountains themselves.